Yes, you are listening to the Sporting Fix, episode 8 today. Thank you for joining us. We have a lot to cover. A grand final, which we witnessed potentially the best one in the history of the AFL. We will be dissecting that deeply today, spending a lot of time on that. And then we'll also be talking about news away from the field, about footy, whether that be the free agency period opens up later or the trades that come with the preseason in football. I will be inviting a guest over to talk about a massive query I have about the AFL pre-game entertainment. I'll be talking about that later. I can't wait to find the answers I potentially need to stop me from worrying about that. And then I'll be talking about the men's cricket and the women's cricket, with Australia versus the West Indies in the women's and the Aussies leading up to the World Cup. So there is a bit to talk about, obviously, mainly in the grand final. So let's get straight into it. Collingwood and Brisbane. It was potentially the best grand final the AFL history has ever had. It was about time that we had a close grand final, and we had one that was close for the entirety of the game. So it was close. The first half was as even as it gets. I mean, only one goal separated the two teams at the main break. It was back and forth goals for either side. The contest, the pressure was on. The 100,000 people were getting involved. It was just a great way to start what led to be the best grand final in my eyes that the AFL has ever produced. It was the epitome of what a grand final is. You know, a close game, an even contest. And at the end of the game, both teams, they had the same amount of contested possessions. So that just shows how close the game was. To have the exact same amount of contested possessions for 2 hours of footy is unbelievable. It hasn't been close in recent years if you talk about AFL Grand Finals. You're dating back to 2018, but that was just the first half, obviously, in the Grand Final. But then, obviously, not just the first half, but the second half was as close as it gets. So it was about time that we had a close Grand Final, and yeah, it was as close as it gets. I mean, it couldn't have been more fitting for Collingwood. It could not have been more fitting because at the end of the day, McRae having a child on the same day he became a premiership coach, Darcy Moore receiving the cup from his dad. You can't script this stuff. So it was Collingwood, they finished on top of the ladder for a reason. They won that minor premiership spot for a reason. And that reason was to get their hands on the silverware, and they certainly did that. It was such a good game. I was nervous myself as a spectator. I don't go for the two teams, but there were butterflies in my stomach. I could not even be close to imagining how stressful it would have been for the people who actually barrack for those two clubs. So it was as good as it gets. I mean, you have to go back to the culture at the Collingwood. And before we dissect the actual game, I want to talk about the culture that Collingwood possess. It is amazing to see. You know, they were singing the song at the end of the game, and Maynard was making everyone in the club rooms to sing the song with him. So he's getting people everywhere, no matter what role they play at the club, to sing the song with the players. And that just brings more connection and more culture to the club. And I feel like this is only the start for Collingwood. I feel like they've got so much ahead of them, and they could easily become like maybe back-to-back champions, or depends how far you want to get. It's probably a bridge too far maybe, but they could go 3 in a row like the Panthers did in the NRL. But obviously, before the grand final, so they lose McStay, they lose Taylor Adams. But then in the first quarter, the Murphy gets lost in the first quarter, right? So he gets subbed out, but as they have all year, Collingwood, they find a way. It is unbelievable how they fight and find ways to end up winning when the final siren sounds. Pendlebury, he kicked his first goal in a grand final, can you believe it? He's been in the system for ages, and he finally kicked that goal late in that third quarter. You know, they win close games like they have all season. They are so good at winning close games, and obviously the one where it matters in the grand final, they do the exact same. So pressure, it doesn't really get to Collingwood. In fact, it makes them thrive. So they are a very, very good team, and we've seen that all year. as I said, I was really nervous watching the game, and I just couldn't imagine how the fans were feeling. I already said this, but I mean, I was actually surprised myself with the fact that I was so nervous, because I don't give two hoots about these teams, but it was just the pure raw football that was being played that I guess made my football emotions just get the better of me. I was riding every single moment, and the game produced exactly what all of us wanted it to produce. There's always controversy in games, and the one that stood out to me obviously was the advantage that was called in that last minute of the last quarter, and you could ask anyone about it, and they'll bring up that exact moment too if you talk about controversy in the game. And in every game there is always controversy, but you've got 100,000 people in the stands. You can't expect the footy players to hear the calls that the umpires make. It was certainly not an advantage for Brisbane. In fact, it was a disadvantage for Brisbane. But it is what it is. Whether they would have converted that to a score, maybe not, but it is what it is. I guess I just sort of had to bring that up. My take on it, obviously, as an umpire, you'd probably want to bring that back and give Brisbane the advantage that they deserved. But obviously, it is what it is. It's over now. Collingwood have won the grand final. But, yeah, you can't change it now. Bobby Hill, the Norm Smith medalist. I cannot go past a Norm Smith medalist. You can't go past the best on ground in any game. You certainly can't go past the Norm Smith medalist. He kicked 4 goals in the first half. He was zippy. He was extremely quick. He was agile. He made the opposition look like spuds. What he was able to do was impeccable. He rightfully deserved that medal. He had 18 disposals. He laid some important tackles. But to kick 4 goals in the first half, you could not dream of a better start to a grand final than what he produced then. Bobby Hill, he can stand up, he can be proud, and every single player at the Collingwood Footy Club should be proud because they played their role, and that's why they finished on top. Nick Dacos, look, he had a very good game. He didn't have the best game he could ever produce, but he did exactly what he needed to do. To have the most disposals on the field out of anyone else is something in itself, and he kicked a goal, 29 touches, and on his standards, it's not amazing, but it is exactly what Collingwood needed him to do. Tom Mitchell as well, defensive game was elite, 13 tackles, and almost, I think every single one of them was vital. He played a tagging role on Neil, he kept Neil to 21 touches, and he gained 24 himself, so he did everything that Craig McRae and Collingwood asked of him. Jeremy Howe, he was instrumental in that last quarter. 9 kicks. He played with 3 broken ribs. That was unbelievable. When Charlie Cameron absolutely lined him up, I didn't actually realise he had 3 broken ribs until after the game. So for him to keep playing and brave and have that courage to continue on in the most important moment of the year was something that should be admired. And he had the most metres gained in that last quarter than anyone. So for him to play with broken ribs and still dominate just says exactly what sort of player he is. Pendlebury, I thought, his last quarter also, 11 disposals. You know, you want your stars to stand up. And I keep saying it, the players that stand up in the last quarter is really what builds a team. Pendlebury stood up. Jeremy Howe stood up. Tom Mitchell stood up. Every single one of Collingwood's stars stood up. I mean, Pendlebury, he is all class. The time, the space he has, the way he just weaves through traffic, you can't teach that sort of stuff. You're born with that. He's remarkable. And what stood out to me also was his on-field coaching, and his support was elite. In that last quarter, what he did to get to players and to really support them through times is so good. He's experienced, and you trust Pendlebury with anything. I mean, even if you've got Alex Carey teaching you how to keep and Pendlebury telling you how to keep too, you'd almost trust Pendlebury. The knowledge he has is insane. So it was really good to see. Obviously, in times where it's really close in a grand final, your coaches, there's a lot of stress on the players because the coaches are hanging up signs saying do this, do that. But then when you've got Pendlebury on the field, also telling you in person, it makes it a lot easier. So it was really good to see him do that as well. Collingwood, as I said earlier, they do deserve this. They finished on top for a reason. They've been the best team all year, and they are deserving winners. But I just want to talk about what really made Collingwood, I guess, get their hands on this trophy. They bought in Mitchell, they bought in Bobby Hill, they bought in Dan McStay. If you think about it, McStay, Hill and Mitchell, they're not big names, but they fill the team exactly with what Collingwood need. Bobby winning Norm Smith medalist, without him they would have lost. It just shows how big the preseason and trade period that Collingwood produced over last season and how important it is, and what Craig McRae, his IQ and everything that Collingwood did was just worked in favour for them. So Mitchell, he's done a lot of positive things for Collingwood. Bobby Hill, as I just said, the Norm Smith medalist, and McStay, every time he's played, he has produced good moments, and it was obviously unfortunate he couldn't get the job done. But the Pies, so they win that, they join Essendon and Carlton, equal on 16 premierships, and it feels as if it is just the beginning. Craig McRae's been coaching Collingwood for 2 years. He got them to a prelim final. I just want to touch on Craig McRae. What he has done, he came to the club when Collingwood finished 17th. The first year in 2022 he coached, he allowed them to finish. He made them finish 4th, right? So they finished 4th under him, and he took them to a prelim final where they lost by 1. And he did not stop there. He was like, all right, we clearly need a better team. And that's why they got Mitchell, that's why they got Bobby Hill, that's why they got Dan McStay. And now they won the premiership. They finished first, they won the premiership, and this is only in his 2nd year as coaching. So they have a lot ahead of him, and they've got a lot to be proud of. Collingwood, 106,000 members. It is insane how big of a club they are. But De Goey as well. 2 massive goals. He wasn't the biggest player on the field, but his 2 goals was all they needed, really, to just keep them at that distance, I guess, away from Brisbane to sort of, I guess, wrench the cup back into their hands. And as a Brisbane's perspective, we've obviously touched on Collingwood a lot, but as a Brisbane's perspective, Zach Bailey, the 2 goals that he kicked was the best goals you will ever see, and he produced them on the biggest stage of the year. The first one, where they're under pressure, they're down 2 goals, they're not winning the footy, he all of a sudden picks it up, runs to the pocket and boots it from beyond 40, is unbelievable. That is something that you'd expect your experienced players to do, and I wouldn't call him experienced, he's a young gun, and he is leading the way. And then the second one, obviously, is as good as it comes, weaving through a couple of players, snapping around the body. They are just elite goals, and you'd expect that from your most experienced, as I said, but the skill he has and the skill that he displayed on grand final day just, I guess, really will give him confidence in the normal home and away games. So that's really good for him. Joe Danaher was good. He created contests. He pushed up the field. Some big marks and a few goals as well. So he was good. But all of it doesn't really matter in the end. Charlie Cameron with 3 goals. Kitty Coleman again. Most metres gained with 761. He had 26 touches at 81%. Hugh McCluggage was good, but it all means nothing now. It doesn't matter who played well. It only matters if you were on top with that last final sign went and they weren't. So I shouldn't really delve into the Brisbane Lions game because, it means absolutely nothing now. But looking back, there were multiple times where Brisbane gave up crucial goals leading into breaks. So the first quarter was De Goey after the siren, Crisp in the second quarter, and then Pendlebury late in the third quarter. So if you look back and you say, oh, if I just stopped them from at least marking it and kicking a goal, they would have won. If they stopped at least one of them, they would have won. You cannot afford to give up crucial goals at the very end of a quarter because it gives you momentum. It gives the other team momentum heading into the next break, and that's exactly what happened with the Brisbane Lions and Collingwood. But obviously looking back, and if they didn't allow it, they would have won. So that's a shame on the field. But I guess away from the field, on the build-up to the grand final, Daniel Rich, he won the longest kick. It was about, there were a lot of positives from Brisbane, but at the end of the day, he won the longest kick. So I guess you could sort of take that as a good result for Brisbane. But that's the grand final. And if I look back at the year of football, what a year. It is the best year, I reckon, football has ever experienced the AFL. 2023, if I look at this, 2023 average game attendance for sport teams worldwide. So this year, Collingwood are second for the most attended sports teams worldwide with 77,659. So they average, every single game they play, they average 77,000. And they're coming second to a team that averages 81,000. But for an AFL, this is good for not only Collingwood, but for the AFL. They are such a big team. It is unbelievable how they are that good and how they draw a crowd. But I feel like it's just thanks to Eddie Maguire and what he's done, and how he put the the Collingwood training at Olympic Park and everything. So for them to average that many people just goes to show how big they are of a club. This is absolutely massive. I can't get over the fact that this is just probably going to make the AFL even bigger. And as I said, I feel like Collingwood are just getting started. So it's good for them, obviously. Collingwood 2023 premiers. But similar to the NRL grand final, the Panthers coming back from the dead to steal an epic 2-point win over the Broncos. It's interesting because the AFL grand final last year was a complete blowout. It was a complete blowout. It was terrible to watch. It was a terrible game to watch. And then the NRL grand final last year was a complete blowout with the Parramatta Eels losing. But then this year, both of them were very, very tense. I obviously watched both of them. So Collingwood obviously winning by only 4 points. It was a great match to see. And then Panthers beating Broncos by 2 points. They're coming back from the dead. So it was massive. I just find it very interesting that both sports last year were a blowout and then this year they're close. But interesting little thing there. However, I do have a query. A query that's been on my mind for quite some time. Now, it is involving the band Kiss, and I have been looking over this video and their performance, and don't get me wrong, overall, their performance was pretty damn good considering they are fossils. However, I just want to understand, because I feel like a few moments, a few little parts in their production, they were lip syncing. And I've got my mate Thomas who does the editing. He does all the behind the scenes things on this podcast. And I've got him to sort of try and discuss what it actually is. So before I introduce him, which I already have, I just want to see, there's a part, Thomas, where Gene Simmons is obviously singing, and there's a little part where his mouth is not moving, right?
Yeah,
so,
that's correct.
Yeah, so for a long duration of sound without Gene Simmons moving his mouth is surely a sign of lip syncing. Just talk us through your thoughts on what actually happened.
Yeah, well, I remember while I was watching that performance, while it was happening, I was thinking that the audio, it was sounding a bit weird. It didn't sound completely right. It seemed like something was off. But when Jonesy actually showed me the video of it playing back, when Gene Simmons was singing, but then his mouth stopped, but then it continued going, that really got me thinking that it was actually, in fact, maybe it could be lip synced.
Yeah.
Now, I do have a few possible reasons of why this could be, and whether or not it is actually lip synced.
Knock yourself out.
So, I guess the first one is, it could just very well be lip synced.
Sorry, before you go, that is my reason. They are lip syncing, and if you can change my mind, that's a bloody good effort. Because in my eyes, I mean, I don't know a lot about tech, but they are lip syncing. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, so that could very well be the case, although it doesn't really seem like there's a proper good reason for that to be the case, other than maybe that Channel 7 is corrupt. But we can get to that later. The second thing I have that it could possibly be is because the microphones that they were singing into were wireless microphones, there is the chance of delay. So...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to butt in a couple of times. I obviously want you to speak.
No worries.
But the delay, right? So
yeah.
There was a moment where he's singing the word crazy.
Yes.
And that is a very long delay. If that is a delay, they need to fix that up because he was literally, he stopped talking and I reckon the bloody sound was hitting, it was going on for ages. So if that is a delay, that has to be poor quality from the audio man.
Yeah, if it is a mic delay as well, which obviously that is a very long delay because that was probably like at least 1 or 2 seconds where most mic delays would maybe only be a couple milliseconds, maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah.
If that was in fact a delay, then I guess if you looked at the rest of the performance, you would then be able to match up, well, is the lips and the audio matching up, and you could easily then tell if it is a delay or not. So it could be delayed, although that's most likely the unlikely option. Now, the third possible thing that this could be, which is also kind of unlikely, but it could be some songs when you listen to it on Spotify or the recorded version, they have a part of the song that is kind of spoken, or it might be it's something that they don't include in the live performance, that the main singer doesn't sing in the performance or say in the performance. So I can't think of a good example, but there is songs that, for example, in the live performance, it's usually at the start of the song as well. There would be maybe a couple words that they say. So is it
like background sound?
Kind of like background sound that they kind of like sound, if you were adding sound effects to a movie or something.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm pretty confident that it wasn't because all I could hear was Gene just singing by himself, and I'm pretty confident that there wasn't anyone in the background.
Yeah, and it does in the middle of a song as well is very weird for it to for that to be the case.
It was in the middle of the song, like
and
I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, oh no, Gene, you've just caused yourself a whole lot of trouble because you're for some reason barely, or in my eyes, barely anyone's picked up on it.
Yeah. I had a quick search on Google to see if people were actually talking about this, and people were talking about it, but the biggest concern was that their Channel 7 added in fake crowd cheers and applause. And that. But I think that's less of a problem than if they were singing it, lip syncing it.
Exactly. You've already got 100,000 people at the stadium. They'll create enough noise in itself, but it's the lips. You're there to listen to the performance. Yes. So if they're lip syncing, it's a terrible performance. And yet, I don't know if they are or not. I don't know if they are or not. But if you're there to listen to Kiss, you want them to actually sing, not just fake it.
And I mean, they may have actually been singing, and there was just some weird technical glitch, or maybe I don't know. Maybe they were. I don't know. It is interesting, or there is the possibility that Channel 7 is corrupt, and they that Kiss was actually singing and performing all their music live, but only to the stadium, or only
just to
no one, and then Channel 7 added the actual recorded tracks over the top.
Would that just be to cover up, just in case the Kiss's performance or voice isn't great?
Yeah, that could be the case.
I heard that they could be covering it up just in case they don't, perform as bad as Meatloaf.
Yes, but for a band that's been performing for 50 years, you'd think it'd be pretty hard to
Exactly, and they're 70 years old, but their voice, you could have an epileptic seizure at the top of the stage and you could probably perform better than Meatloaf. But hey, Meatloaf he's performed terrible at the AFL Grand Final, but he's been remembered for that. So if people remember Meatloaf just for that one reason, so good on him.
Yeah. So that, to be honest, we don't really know unless we're working behind the scenes there.
If you could place a bet out of those three reasons, what would it be?
To be honest,
because I'm saying lip syncing. I'm putting it out there.
Yeah,
that was too far. Like I get I get like a tiny bit of a delay, but boy, Gene Simmons has done himself dirty.
It's unlikely it's a mic delay. It's unlikely that it was a part of the song in a recorded thing. And to be honest, I mean, Channel 7 could be corrupt. Probably not. If it is anything of those four things I mentioned, it is most likely going to be lip synced. Yeah. But it doesn't make sense for why it would be lip synced, considering
maybe
how often they've...
I certainly hope it's not lip syncing, but anything's a surprise these days. If anyone is listening to this and have their thoughts, please just chuck it out there. I am very, very personally intrigued because I saw their performance and I'm like, what the hell was that? So if it is lip syncing, if it's not, I just want to hear everyone's opinions because it is a pretty big topic at the moment. They did perform well at the end of the day. I was actually quite entertained with their performance, but just a little controversial thing there. But well, thanks, Thomas. Thanks for
no worries.
Giving
Thanks
up your time.
Having me on. Make sure if you're listening right now, make sure you rate the podcast on Spotify. 5 stars, obviously.
Absolutely.
Make sure you go follow the Instagram page and also subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
And there should be a clip of this thing on the YouTube channel where you can leave your comments and thoughts down below.
Do that. I do want to hear it. I am very intrigued. So thanks, Thomas.
No worries. Enjoy the rest of the podcast, folks.
Will do. So that was good to get out there. I did want to listen and hear my thoughts and Thomas's thoughts on the KISS performance. It was good in the end of the day, but we'll go past that. So grand final ticked off. KISS performance ticked off. We've got a couple of things. So the news away from the footy field and then a bit of cricket. So thanks for tuning in. We'll just talk about the footy at the moment, the pre-season football. Not pre-season football, sorry. What am I talking about? The trade period. The everything going along away from the football field. So Daniel Howe has hung up his boots, which is probably good for North Melbourne. He didn't really offer a lot for them. So, I mean, good on him for making the AFL and doing what he did. But, just a little hanging up the boots there. So, although footy season is over on the field, off the field it's just beginning. So, all our eyes are turned to the national draft in November. And obviously the free agency period opens on the Friday, the 6th of October and closes on Monday, the 16th of October. So, Marby or Chol may be going to North Melbourne. He may be going to a few other clubs as well. This is interesting because I thought North Melbourne were in the box seat to steal him. But it turns out he actually met with Hawthorn. He met with North Melbourne and he met with Adelaide last week. So he's expected to make a decision on his preferred destination this week. I feel like whoever does get him has got a good pick because I feel like he's classy. He's a good left foot. He performed well in the VFL. So whoever gets him, I feel like they'll be pretty happy with him as well. A few clubs to keep an eye on as well is Port Adelaide. I just feel like, they'll be able to produce some good quality picks. They've got Zerk Thatcher. They've got Jordan Sweet. So they've got a few good picks. So I feel like they're going to be, and obviously Esava Radagalia, who's going to go to Port Adelaide as well. So they got 3 good picks, I reckon, and there'll be a few bigger names added, and they'll get better as they go along. But I feel like, so Port Adelaide are a team to keep an eye on, and North Melbourne as well. You can't really go past them. The AFL, North have had picks given to them on a silver platter, so they need to be able to use it. The AFL have provided literally everything and more that North Melbourne need, so they need to be able to use it. All right, so they're trying to eye off pick number 1, which obviously if they do so, obviously it'll be a good result for them, but they'll be able to produce some good quality picks with the ones that they have. So they're the 2 clubs I think we need to keep an eye on over the pre-season and trade period, I guess. Also, the Adelaide free agent Tom Doherty will prefer to move to Brisbane despite the interest from Collingwood. So that's interesting because I feel like, both teams are a destination club. They've obviously just made the grand final, but Collingwood have won, and I feel like they're a better team than Brisbane. Than Brisbane. So I'm a bit surprised that Doherty has moved or wants to move to Brisbane. I feel like if it was me, I'd certainly try and choose Collingwood. And then Goldstein, talking about Collingwood, people thought he was going to move there, but he's chosen Essendon. So there's a few interesting picks that have happened and interesting choices, but it is what it is now. Charlie Constable also hanging up the boots. A shame for him. He only played a couple of games for Gold Coast, and he did pretty well. It's just he couldn't hold his spot. So a bit of a shame there. Caden Coleman, he finished second place in the Gary Ayres Award. What a September for his lethal for the Brisbane's lethal left footer. He was instrumental. But then, of course, Sam Walsh has been named the Gary Ayres Award winner. How good it! First time in history that a person that didn't make the grand final won the Gary Ayres medal. That just shows how good he was in the final. So good on him and good on Caden Coleman and everyone I just mentioned them for moving and getting awarded, getting the deserved recognition that they need and they deserve. So away from the footy field now, but I guess before we move to cricket, I just want to quickly announce again that free agency opens on the Friday, 6th of October and closes on the Monday, the 16th. So it'll be all eyes turned to the free agency period where a lot of trades and a lot of movement will be happening away from the footy field. But before we move to another sport, I'll stay at footy because I want to mention, I guess, my tips and predictions that I had for the finals. And I did pretty well in the end. I actually missed only one game. So I tipped Collingwood in a Brisbane grand final and Collingwood did so. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I'll keep doing predictions for cricket as well, moving into the future, and then footy next year as well. So just a little heads up there. But now moving to cricket, Stark getting a hat-trick. How good is he? He's such a lethal left-arm fast bowler. He's sitting in the top 5 currently for most wickets in a World Cup. He could easily move up a few places if he keeps picking up wickets like he did last week. Smith, he got a 50, leading into the World Cup, starting on the 5th, but Australia will play on the 8th. So they need to fire straight away, or else they are pretty good in World Cups, Australia. So hopefully that little dull slop that they hit will evaporate quickly, because I wasn't that happy with them, and hopefully they heard and changed. So we'll now go to the women's cricket to quickly end this segment and end the podcast. There's been 2 games, and there's going to be one on Thursday. But on Sunday, the 1st of October, the first one occurred, and Hayley Matthews got 99 not out of 74, and then she followed up with a century, which we'll get to in a second. But how good is she? She's so good. And then Alyssa Healy, 56, and then Talia McGrath, 60 off 32. So Australia winning by 8 wickets. They were very good. But I want to go to the second match, where West Indies won by 7 wickets. It was such a high-scoring match. It's so rare that you get both teams scoring over 200 in T20s. Phoebe Litchfield, 52 off 19, the equal fastest 50 in history in the women's game. Elise Perry, 70 off 46. It was high scoring. It was about, at the end of the 20 overs, you think Australia are home by the length of the Flemington Straight. But enter Hayley Matthews again. 132 off 64. What she was able to do, she was seeing the balls like beach balls. But Australia, they didn't really change. So they bowled it outside off, and she had a striker at a 300, and they just kept bowling there. So she could put a blindfold on her, Hayley Matthews, and just know exactly where the ball was going, because Australia didn't change. And then they eventually got her out. But credit to Hayley Matthews for leading her team. Stephanie Taylor for 59 or 41, so Matthews and Taylor put on a nice partnership there. But it's going to be interesting heading into Thursday, the third and last T20, 1-1. Hopefully the Aussies can get the job done. But if we look at the runs, the most runs, Hayley Matthews on 231, and then second is Elise Perry on 70. So that just shows how good Hayley Matthews has been. It'll be interesting on Thursday to see who brings home the cookies. So thank you, everybody, for listening to this podcast. A guest, cricket, footy, grand final, news away from the field, and my predictions. So, it's been good. It's been such a good year of football. I've been honoured to talk about the game, and I'll be very happy to continue on with cricket in the future. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a good week. I'll see you next week.